Hey lovelies, it's MLP with Lovely Lulu Designs, and in this video I will show you how to make this textured vintage patina tumbler. For this project I used a number of different materials including tissue paper, alcohol inks, metallic foils, eco glitters, stencils, and acrylic paints. As always, I will link the materials I used to create this tumbler in the description section of the video. Also, as a thank you for watching these videos, Cat Glitter Factory as well as Samalam West Coast Vinyl are both offering discount codes for their products for fans of the channel, so stay tuned to get those codes. Finally, with Easter this weekend, I will be running a sale on my Etsy shop. Between April 2nd and April 5th, 2021, you will get 30% off your entire purchase when you purchase $10 or more on digital files. The link for my Etsy shop is also in the description section below. With that out of the way, let's get started. For this tumbler, we are starting off with a 20-ounce straight. The difference between a 20-ounce straight and a 20-ounce skinny is sort of what the name implies. A skinny tumbler has a slight taper, and a straight tumbler is perfectly straight on the side. So I personally really like these ones better. First of all, I find that I have an easier time getting my hand inside for cleaning them when I'm hand washing, but also I find that they're a lot easier to decorate because there is no taper. So if you want to do something like a wrap, or if you have to do a tumbler that has measurements around it, it's going to be consistent measurements from top to bottom. So that's a nice feature on the straight as well. I'm noting that a lot of the tumbler suppliers are starting to change out their stock, and they're starting to offer some 20-ounce or 30-ounce straights now as well, which is really awesome for us people who decorate them. So that's really exciting, and I know that DAHT is starting to sell these as well, so that's pretty great. So in this case here, you're going to notice my tumbler is dirty. I had tried a few different techniques on this tumbler, and then I just washed it off, and it was just sort of like a trial sample cup for me. But now I'm ready to decorate it, and because I'm going to be doing layers and sort of covering all of this, I don't really concern myself about any of this leftover sort of grunge or texture or evidence from when I had trialed a few things on here, because this is all going to get covered up. So to start off this tumbler, we're going to be needing to add some texture, and this is the same technique that I did in the Christmas Overkill cup, where I'm going to be adding tissue paper onto it. So I have some black tissue paper here that I have just scrunched up into a ball. In my last video, I mentioned that I like to usually use a tissue paper that is a different color from my base because it's easier for me to see it when I apply it, so I kind of see if I have any gaps. Unfortunately, I don't have anything other than black, but in this case, it's going to end up saving me because I'm not going to have to end up spray painting it black after I'm done with this. So you can use a different color of tissue paper. It might be easier to see. You can have whatever you have on hand, but basically if you do that, you're going to need to spray paint it black when you're done applying the tissue paper and sealing it onto your tumbler. So in order to apply this, we're going to basically decoupage it on, and we're going to be using Mod Podge for that. So I have my little dish, and I have my Mod Podge, and this bottle is almost empty, and you are going to need a fair amount of Mod Podge for this, so just go ahead and put a good amount in your container. And in this case here, we're not really going to be too concerned about brush strokes when we're actually applying, but I still like to use my trusty Taklon brush because I just find that I get really good, oh, this one I didn't clean well, I'm gonna have to go back to that. I didn't find that I get really good I find I get better coverage, and I just really like using the Taklon brushes. I find that they give me nice, smooth, even strokes. So I've got my Taklon brush, I've got my Mod Podge, I've got my crinkled up tissue paper. You can open it up and re-crinkle it, get as much texture in there as you can. And then what I'm going to start to do is I'm going to start just tearing the tissue paper up. And this tissue paper is a lot easier to tear than the last tissue paper I had, which I think was treated. It was a lot sturdier. Doesn't really matter size. You can kind of tear larger pieces, you can tear smaller pieces, you can kind of do whatever it is that you want to do with this. This is all going to be layered. It's all for that nice textured vintage look on the bottom. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush, and I'm just going to start putting some Mod Podge on my tumbler. Now, one of the things that I mentioned in the Christmas Overkill is that you want to treat tissue paper just like you would treat fabric or like you would treat cardstock. You want to make sure that there's going to be a rim, a stainless steel rim between the paper and here, because you don't want to have the tissue paper come all the way up, because you're not going to be able to seal it properly with epoxy. It is going to give you a much higher chance of a failed seal. So you can do it one of two ways. You can either try to just apply it slightly below the line, giving yourself some room, or you can just apply it however you want and then use a cup edging tool that you would use for fabric for this process. My last tumbler that I did this method, I showed you, I kind of had it right below. This time I'm going to show you by just applying it wherever I want and cutting it off afterwards. So those are the two different techniques that you can do for that. So when I'm applying it, what I do is I place it on and I dab it down. I am not rubbing it because I don't want to smooth out those crinkles that are there. All right, I just want to dab it down. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that there's no air bubbles under here, because air bubbles will not give you a proper seal. You want to make sure that even though it's crinkled, it is still glued down. So you're just going to dab. And then I'm going to want to overlap because I don't want to have any gaps between my tissue paper. So what I do is I take more Mod Podge, and rather than brushing it, right now the tissue paper is wet, so it's very, very fragile. I'm going to dab the Mod Podge on top of it as well. Just going to just kind of bounce it on top. And then I can take another piece of tissue paper and apply it right next to that. And again, I am looking to make sure that I don't have any air bubbles, and then I'm just pressing it down. If you have placed it down and there was no Mod Podge underneath, just peel it back. This is straight stainless, so I can just brush a little bit on and then drop it down. And you're just going to follow this same technique all the way around the tumbler. So right here, I'm just going to dab that to make sure that it's going to be glued on. And if you don't add enough, it's too shallow, just come back, add more. So here it was kind of folded underneath itself. So just to kind of keep it from doing that, I'm just gonna take that out and dab it down. Here is where I'm talking about there's like a little bit of an air bubble. I don't know if you can see that. So what I wanna make sure is that I'm not allowing that to happen, and I'm dabbing it out. So follow this process. We're gonna wrap the entire tumbler, and we're going to wrap it around the bottom as well. So I'll just sort of show you how that looks. The nice thing about this method is that because we are looking for texture, you can just wrap it any way you want, and if it folds on itself, that's fine. So just to kind of show you here, I'm just going to wrap it. So here we have that little crease. I will add a little bit more Mod Podge here and just fold that crease down. You're not worried about those things. The point of the cup is to get as much texture as you can. So I'm going to speed up the rest of this process, and I might even cut some of it out because I don't want to bore you. It's pretty simple. We're just going to go around adding the Mod Podge and adding the tissue paper. Once I'm done with that, I'm not going to seal it right away because, as I mentioned, the tissue paper is going to be wet with the glue, so it's going to be very, very fragile, so I don't want to seal it right away. So once you're done wrapping your cup, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to want to wait until it fully dries, and then you can seal it with Mod Podge. So I'll sort of show you guys that when I get there. So I'm done applying it. So what I like to do right before I wait for this to dry is I just like to sort of go through and make sure I don't have any edges that are sticking up. I want to make sure everything is Mod Podged down. So just go over it, make sure you don't have anything that looks concerning to you, make sure it's all sort of flat. And then once you've done that, you just wait for it to dry, and I'll be back to show you the sealing process. The Mod Podge is completely dry. You can tell it's dry when it is completely clear and when it doesn't feel at all tacky. It's totally hard. It's not soft anymore. So now I'm going to be ready to start sealing this also with Mod Podge. Because it's tissue paper and it's really fine, I generally only need one pretty thick coat of the Mod Podge in order to seal it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, I usually keep my Mod Podge on my paintbrush in just a Ziploc bag sealed, so I don't have to worry about waste. I can kind of just keep using what I was already working with, and I'm not wasting my time getting more Mod Podge out or getting rid of it in the sink. And also I'm not worrying about having to wash my brush all the time, which, you know, can also cause damage to your brush, like wear and tear on it. So now I'm just going to take a good amount of Mod Podge and I'm just going to seal it. So with all the texture, you want to make sure that you're getting into all the little nooks and crannies. The nice thing about Mod Podge is that it is white when it goes on, so you can see whether or not you have any black areas. You can make sure that you're actually covering the whole thing. You might want to do a second coat just to be safe, but I found that one coat pretty thick is usually enough for me. So I'm just going to do the one coat and let it fully dry before I move on to the next step. The Mod Podge is completely dry. It only took one good coat to seal it because, like I mentioned, the tissue paper is really thin, so it doesn't take a lot to get it so that it's fully sealed and protected. So our next step is going to be to get rid of the excess paper that is around the rim of the cup, since I wasn't careful with my placement like I was in the Christmas Overkill tutorial. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be using a tool. This is from Wicked Shimmer Supply. It is their cup edging tool. It also has some other names that are not quite as PG, but its official name is the cup edging tool. The original design for this does come from Wicked Shimmer Supply, so definitely purchase it through them if you can. I know that in Canada it can be a little bit expensive to get it from them. Cat Glitter Factory did do a buy-in for these a while back, and she may still have some extras. This is primarily used for fabrics. However, I've also found that it's worked well for my tissue paper as well, and I think some people have also had success using it for things like getting a good vinyl rim or a nice edge on scrapbook paper and that type of thing. So basically it is just a blade. You can adjust how high you want it to be. In this case here, I want to have my blade as low and close to the bottom of the rim as possible. I'm only wanting to take off a small amount, so I actually don't have any of my spacers between the base and my blade. Replacement blades from these can be purchased through Wicked Shimmer Supply, or else it is these single edge razors that you can just purchase in bulk, and you always want to make sure that you're using a sharp blade when you're doing this. So basically I have this paper here which is still dry, so just to kind of, I never sealed it, so it tears off really easily, so I'm just going to kind of tear it off from around the rim just to give it a little bit easier of a working, an ability to work with it. And now I'm going to place it so that my rim is on the bottom, and I'm just placing it firmly against here, and I'm just going to start to turn it up against the blade, applying a fair amount of pressure. You always want to make sure you're using a sharp blade, or else you'll have tearing and you won't get nice clean lines. I usually like to go around a couple times just to make sure that I've completely cut through all the way. You can often feel once your blade is no longer having resistance from paper or fabric, you'll feel it's against the steel of the tumbler. So you're just gonna kind of go around it a couple times to get that nice straight edge. So there's my edge here. So when it comes to fabric, it's usually pretty easy to just peel it back. The tissue paper, not as much. I think it's because it's thinner. So you may need to pick at it a little bit longer, but basically you're just gonna come in here, see if I can find a good starting point. There we go. And you're just gonna kind of peel it around. So it's gonna be, like I mentioned, it's not quite as easy with the tissue paper as it is with fabric because the fabric is thicker, but you can kind of, I had on my last tumbler that I did this way, every once in a while I would get a really good piece that would let loose, and then other pieces I just had to pick smaller parts at a time, but it will give you a nice straight edge on it when you're done with it. So just kind of keep going around your tumbler, working on it until you have a nice clean rim. So my rim is cleaned up. It's pretty good. There's a couple little spots right above my line here where I couldn't quite pull it back, but that's okay. I'm not too concerned about it. My biggest issue is making sure that the top part, right where that stainless steel meets the edge, that is completely clear of any glue or any of the tissue paper, so because that's where my seal is going to happen. So that's the part that I really want to make sure is clean. So it's looking pretty good. I'm happy with this. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to pop it back onto the football, and we're going to get ready to start adding its color. So I'm going to be using some white acrylic paint. Any white acrylic paint is fine. I'm having here Apple Barrel. You only need like a teeny tiny amount. And then you're just going to take an old chip brush, and you're just going to put some in your bristles. And you're going to take your tumbler and you're just going to brush it on, and you're not looking for full coverage. You're just looking to have a few spots maybe being a little bit whiter, and you just a little more paint, a little bit whiter than others, but you're not looking for full coverage. Make sure you're getting all the way to your rim. And this is going to help build some of the texture and the color. There's an area that you find is a little bit too black. You can put just a little bit more paint on there. So that's basically all that I'm doing here. So I've just got some texture. I'm going in the same direction with my brush strokes. I'm not going back and forth. You are going to possibly, well, you actually are going to be able to see the brush strokes. So make sure that you're going in the same direction. And I just have some on the bottom there as well. So I'm going to let this fully dry, and then we're going to add our alcohol inks. The white acrylic paint is dry, so I am now ready to start adding my other colors. I can't remember if I said this or not, but because I've been filming this over the course of a few days, but basically when I had put down my tissue paper, I had used black tissue paper on a black base, so when I sealed it with the Mod Podge, it was already nice and like one nice uniform black. If you did not use black tissue paper on a black base, if you used any other colors, you want to spray paint it black prior to adding your white paint. So if I didn't mention it, you heard it twice because it's really important. So then we just put on the white paint in sort of sporadic, using straight brush strokes, not changing your direction, just going up and down. And now we are ready to start adding our alcohol inks. So I'm going to be using the saran wrap method for applying my inks, and this is a pretty popular common way to do the alcohol ink camo cups. So if you've ever done or seen the alcohol ink camo cups before, we are using the exact same technique here. The only difference is we are changing the colors from camo to a patina palette. So I am using the Brea Reese alcohol inks. I have here Ocean Green is going to be my first color, so I just like to shake my inks up a little bit and pop the caps off. My next color is going to be Turquoise from Brea Reese. And then I'm going to be adding Lake Blue as well. And my final color is going to be Teal. These are new to Cat Glitter Factory, so if you're looking for alcohol inks, that's a great place in Canada to get them. So I absolutely love how vivid the colors are. So yeah, so Amy's just brought in this line and they're absolutely gorgeous. So I'm just going to start adding my inks sort of randomly in spots on my saran wrap. kind of going back and forth between my blue colors and my greens. Okay. And once I've got my inks on the saran wrap, you're just gonna take it, you're gonna fold it, and you're just gonna kind of mush them together. And then you can peel open your saran wrap again. This is definitely a messy process, so I do recommend wearing gloves. It does stain your hands pretty good. Leaving my tumbler on the football. Okay, I'm gonna try to do this in camera. Move these out of the way. Hopefully I don't hit my camera stand. I'm just gonna wrap my tumbler up. If you have a desk that you want to keep nice, be sure to lay something down before you do this, because you can see here, like, my mat is just totally stained from all these colors. And I'm just going to kind of press it on. These little crinkles in the paper will give you, or sorry, the saran wrap will give you really nice effects. And I'm just going to kind of squeeze it in there, playing around with that color a little bit. Oh, hit the camera. Figured that was going to happen. Okay, and now I'm gonna peel that off. And now I'm gonna take my paper and I'm gonna start dabbing it around areas where it's still white to kind of fill those places in. And you can do this multiple times. So if you didn't get full coverage, if you want to have darker colors, you want to layer them a little bit more, then you can definitely do that. So I'm now just going to start taking some of the excess inks on the saran wrap and just kind of dabbing it where I want it on there. And I still have a few white spots, so I think I'm going to add just a little bit more onto my saran wrap. I'm going to do it one more time. So again, just kind of keep doing this until you're happy with it. And you're gonna get some really nice layered color effects. So this here is where you can see the brush stroke in here, which is why I wanted to make sure that I'm going in the same direction for anywhere where the brush stroke is gonna be evident. And that's how you kind of get some of these nice textures too, because in some areas, since the brush strokes are so light, you just see more of that tissue paper texture. In other areas, the brush stroke is more coming through. So, and you get sort of those lighter areas because of the white paint being thicker there, and then you have darker areas where it was more of the black. So it kind of helps to give you all of that different color depth and dimension just by doing a few simple little tricks. Okay, so overall, I'm happy with that. If I've missed any areas, I'm not too worried about it because this is just our bottom. I can always cover it with something else that we're going to be showing you guys next. So I'm just going to give this a couple of hours to dry. I want to make sure that my inks dry really well. And once it's dry, I will come back and show you guys my next steps. And also I just want to mention that my camera is really picking this up as blue, but in person there's definitely a lot more green. So I'm hoping when I change settings and the location, you can maybe pick up more of the greens that are in here as well. So that's that for the step. Our alcohol inks are now dry, so the next step is going to always be to seal them. So as you know, if you work with alcohol inks, that there's a lot of different things that can kind of reactivate the alcohol inks. So even though they're dry, it will make them start to run and blend again. One of those things is often even the sealers that we use to stop this from happening. And a perfect example of that is Quick Coat. So usually I'm not going to recommend Quick Coat directly over top of alcohol inks. However, in this case, it doesn't really matter if I smear them a little bit, but there's a couple things to keep in mind if you're going to be doing this method. I like to do this a little bit because it does sort of change, again, a bit of the way that the colors sort of lay on the cup. It sort of will maybe make some areas a little bit lighter, kind of move some of the inks around to other locations, and it will just sort of adjust the effect slightly. Not necessarily a lot, depending on how thin your coat is or how long you've been letting your inks dry for. But if you don't want to have that happen, if you want it to be sort of set the way that you have it now, I would recommend doing a spray sealer first. So the spray sealer though can also kind of either discolor or make your alcohol inks run. So use light coats if you're going to be doing that. If you're going to be doing the brush on technique like I'm going to be doing, and more the reason why I'm doing this is because it's still cold outside in Canada, and I don't really feel like running outside, so I am going to use my brush on Quick Coat from CC DIY, which is also available at M&Cat Glitter Factory. I'm going to be using a Taklon brush for this. It's going to be important to keep in mind that the inks are going to get on this brush. So I'm going to keep a piece of paper towel here so I can kind of get rid of some of the color onto the paper towel. But also when I clean this brush, I'm going to need to do a very thorough job, because if I'm going to use this brush again later to coat a final quick coat on, say, like a white cup or something like that, the last thing I want to have is have a blue tint on my brush that would then transfer onto my other project. So either make sure you do a really, really good job with the brush, cleaning it, or you can keep a separate brush, sort of keep this one off to the side, and this is one that you use only when you're going to be working with darker colors and that sort of thing, or using it for this. I make enough of this style tumbler that I actually sort of have kind of dedicated one brush to this type of project. So I'm going to start by just putting some Quick Coat in a dish and taking my brush, and I'm not going to put it on, you know, crazy thick amounts, but I am going to start brushing it on. And like I said, you're already going to see there that the color is kind of lifting. And like I said, that this is going to, in some areas, make the colors look lighter. In other areas, it might move the color a little bit darker. And I'm just going to follow the same brush stroke pattern I did before. So just going up and down in long, even strokes. So that's all it's going to take. It's just going to take one coat of the Quick Coat, and then once this is dry, we can move on to adding our foils. The sealer is now fully dried, and you want to make sure that when your sealer is dry, that it is dry completely hard. You don't want there to be any tack left on it, or else this next step is going to be a little bit messy for you. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be adding the foil flakes. In the past, you've seen me use the Speedball adhesive size for metal flakes. However, you can also use Tack-It, and I decided I wanted to use Tack-It this time just to show you that it works as well. Also, I really like using Tack-It. I've kind of been preferring it to the Speedball lately, because when you apply Tack-It, you can see initially where you've put the Tack-It on when it's still wet, so it's not kind of a guessing game of you trying to remember where you placed the adhesive. So I'm going to just take my Tack-It now. This is diluted with water. I think I've used about a 60-40 Tack-It to water ratio. However, I just kind of eyeball it, so it's not an exact science. This has been sitting for a little while, so the water and the Tack-It have started to separate. But I like to keep a container of this because I use it quite a lot. And I'm just going to be mixing it back up. I'm right now just using a metal stir stick for this process. And once it looks like a nice, smooth, even color, you can tell that the water and the Tack-It have been combined completely again. It doesn't take all that long. And then I'm just going to clean off my tool as well, because this will dry tacky, and this also interacts with epoxy, and I use this for stirring epoxy as well, so I want to make sure I do a good job cleaning it. So I'm just going to take a little bit of acetone, and I just, of course, got my tissue paper right in my glue. Kind of clean my surface a little bit too. Okay. So I like to use for this process just an eyebrow brush. So it's just kind of, or like one of those mascara kind of brushes too, if you have like those disposable mascara or, you know, additional mascara wands that are clean. And you don't need a ton of it on your brush. In fact, I like to have just a little bit, so that way I can kind of keep a little bit of the texture on here. If you dip a little too much, you can just scrape it off on your side. And I'm just going to pick some random spots on here where I just kind of want to have my metal flake attached to, and I'm going to be again following the same brush strokes that I use just to kind of keep it all in line. So you're just going to sort of add randomly wherever you feel that you want to do it. This technique is all about layering, and you can skip any point. Like if you said you were happy with this, by all means, you don't have to keep going and adding. However, this is the amount of detail and the layering that I like. So I'm just going to show you my entire process. And again, at any point, if you want to skip something or you want to add something different, make it your own, you know, play with it, do what you want. So that's good. I don't want to have it overwhelming. I like that the way it is. So as you can see, right now you can kind of see where I've laid my lines to add my foil flakes, which is different from when I use the adhesive size where you couldn't really see that, but this will dry clear. So I'm going to show you how you find those points once they've dried. So I'm just going to put this off to the side, and you want it to dry completely. I'm going to, in a minute, wash this with just some Dawn dish soap and some water to make sure that I clean it. I don't want it to be left on here and then getting gunky in between, because then, as you can see, these like little spaces between. I like that look. I like that sort of, I think it adds a little bit of a distressed look on this technique. So what I'm going to be using are the metallic foil flakes from M&Cat Glitter Factory, and I'm going to be using two different colors. I'm going to be using, not this one, I'm going to be using the blue variegated flakes and also the green ones. Hold on. Yes, whoops. And the green variegated flakes. As you can see, when you open them up, the flakes are actually in pretty big pieces. You can apply them like that, that's totally fine. I, however, like to make my flakes a little bit smaller. So what I do is I use a grinder. I got this grinder from Amazon. The grinder initially had a metal like mesh piece right here to kind of make it so that only like the fine pieces would fall through, but I'm not grinding up my flakes that much. So what I ended up doing was very carefully I cut it out, and then I took my Dremel and I sanded all the way along here so I wouldn't accidentally hurt myself on it. So I have sort of adapted this. I know that there are molds for grinders that you can make with epoxy. I don't really know how they work, but that might be an option, just to sort of have like that cup to kind of catch it and a little piece to sort of grind your flakes up. I've also had success just taking some parchment paper and putting my metal flakes in and just sort of rubbing it between and being very careful not to spill it out the sides. That's worked as well, but I'll just sort of show you my process. Again, you don't have to do this, you can just use the large flake, but I like the added detail and dimension you get when you kind of grind this up a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to take a few pieces here. I'm not going to do all of it on camera. I'm just going to sort of show you really quickly. It's kind of sticking to me. Just take a few pieces of your flake, place it on your grinder, and then I'll just pop the lid on, and I'm just going to kind of spin it a little bit back and forth. Shake it up a little bit maybe, and then pop off my lid, and you'll see that it's just kind of made them into these smaller pieces. So now what I'm going to do, because it doesn't really fit down through the holes, it's still too big, I'm just going to flip it upside down and dump it in. You can use your tweezers or anything else to just kind of put the rest in. And that's how I prep it. Now I'm going to add some green as well, and I'll just sort of mix them in together. And I just do this while my Tack-It is drying. I like to make quite a bit of it at one time because I'll use it for multiple projects. Again, this part totally optional. So the Tack-It is dry now. It's clear, you can't see it anymore, so that's how we know that it's dry. So I'm going to be taking a small eyeshadow brush here, and I'm just going to be using this to apply my metal flakes that I just ground up. And basically I'm just going to sort of feel here, I feel that it's a little bit tacky here, so I'm just going to take my brush, dip it into some flakes, and just using that brush I'm going to burnish it on. And I'm just going to go around my cup, and this is how I'm going to find where I need to apply my foil flakes, and where I say it's important that you allow your sealer to dry hard, because if your sealer is still tacky, your foil flakes are just going to stick all over the place. So this section here is completely covered in flakes. So now I can even just take my brush and I can sort of feel along where it catches. And again, that's how I know that that's the area to add some more flakes. So I'm just going to continue doing the same process, going around the cup and finding wherever it is that I need to add this. So once I'm done burnishing with the brush, what I like to do is I just kind of like to take my hand and go over it and make sure I'm knocking off any loose flakes that are possibly standing up, because that can be a problem when it comes around time to epoxy. If it's standing underneath the epoxy, your epoxy will have an area there that will be pointed and sharp, and it will make it a little bit more work in terms of sanding and prepping for future coats later. So I always like to try to smooth out my bottom surfaces whenever I can. So that's good. Now I'm just going to take my flakes and put them to the side, and I'm done with my brush as well. What I'm going to do extra is that these are still a little bit more solid than what I really want them to do. So this is a bit of a wire brush. It has that coarser texture. So you can even just sort of take your brush and come back over some of these areas and scratch it up a little bit, just stress it. This is meant to be a little bit grungy. It's meant to be not perfect. And again, you know, like it's the finer details that make these things sort of pop. So totally optional. I just like to scuff it up a little bit, give it a few scratches here and there. It doesn't make a massive effect, but it does just a little bit, and I like it. Okay, so I don't even have to wait for this to dry because the Tack-It's already dry. I can now move on to the next part, so I'm just going to get what I need for that, and I will show you right away. So again, the details are in the layers, so my next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be adding kind of a black wash. I've taken a chip brush and I've just wet it under the sink, so the bristles here are wet with water. It's not dripping, as you can see, but it is wet. And I'm going to take a little bit of just black acrylic paint. I have the Liquitex Basics in Mars Black, but any black acrylic will work. You just need a tiny amount of paint. You're not going to need a lot. And I'm hoping my brush is wet enough, actually. Let's see here. No, my brush isn't wet enough. Hold on. I'm just going to add a little bit of water. So I've now got a little bit more water on here, so you can see it kind of has that runnier consistency. In this case here, a little is going to go a very long way. So I'm just going to take my brush with that wet and that black, and we're just going to brush right over our background. Again, we're going to follow our same brush strokes, just going from the top to the bottom. Now, You can leave it if you like it like this, or you can take a paper towel and you can just sort of dab some of the excess out. And this just sort of adds a little bit extra distressing on that tumbler. So now I'm going to let my paint dry, and then I'm going to want to seal this again because I want to make sure, actually no, I'm not. Now I'm going to let my paint dry, and then I'm going to come back with some Tack-It, and we're going to add a little bit of glitter. For my next step, I'm going to be wanting to add just a little bit of glitter. So I'm going to be using Vintage Soul from Em & Cat, and I'm going to be applying it the same way as I just did my foil flakes with the Tack-It and my little eyebrow brush. So I'm going to just take a little bit, dip it in, kind of scrape off any excess. In some cases, I might want this to sort of overlap and spill onto, have some of that glitter sort of blend in or spill onto the foil, and just kind of bring it in that way. In other cases, I might just put it sort of randomly here and there. But no matter what, I'm just gonna sort of put it on the tumbler where I feel like it might look nice. No rhyme or reason, just wherever I kind of feel like it. And again, I'm just looking to add some accents or details to this cup. I'm not looking really to fill a ton of space with it. If you remember, the details are in the layers here. So once that's dry, I will add my glitter. Our Tack-It is dry and it is now ready for glitter, so I'm going to just be sprinkling on some Vintage Soul right over the entire surface of the cup, and wherever the Tack-It is where the glitter will stick. And I'm just doing this over top of some parchment paper so that way I can collect whatever excess glitter falls, and I can put it back into my bottle. Waste not, want not. We're going to do the same on the bottom. And I'm just going to knock some of that excess glitter off as well. And then I'm going to take a rough brush. This is a very rough, sturdy brush, so it's going to do a good job brushing off any of the excess glitter that I have. And you're just going to go around your entire cup, cleaning off the surface. Okay, so that's done. There's going to be some extra glitter that's just going to sort of hang out on your cup. That's okay. I don't mind there being a little bit. It's just going to add some extra sparkle, and I'm going to be adding some more sparkle to this cup later anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I did get the majority of it off, so that's where it looks like right now. And I'm just going to put this back into my bottle, and then I'll show you guys my next detail layer. Next, I'm going to want to add just a few bronze highlights. I'm going to be using Liquitex ink for this in Iridescent Rich Bronze. You can use an acrylic paint in bronze as well, or even like a gold or something like that if you want to. But I'm just going to be using what I have, which is this here. And I'm just going to shake it up a little bit, and I'm going to put just a little bit here onto some parchment paper. And I'm going to use that same rough bristle textured brush that I had here that I just used to clean off the glitter. And you're just going to dab a little bit on your brush, like you're not going to need a lot. And just right here onto that surface, using a very light hand, I'm just going to kind of hit a few areas on the tumbler. I used way more ink, or brought out way more ink than what I'll need. And I'll just kind of go back and forth from, you know, doing lines like this with the thin part to maybe doing a little bit thicker with the wider part of the brush. I'm not going to add too much. Again, I really don't want to overwhelm it, but I'm just sort of dry brushing just a little bit on, just to get a bit of an extra hit of that color on this background, to sort of add to that patina kind of effect here. Okay, so I just got a little bit of that color on here now. So what I'm going to do now at this point is I do want to seal this. I want to make sure that my glitter isn't going anywhere. I'm going to first seal it with a spray sealer because the foil flakes, if I go straight into the Quick Coat has in the past sort of stripped some of the foil flakes from their color a little bit. So to prevent losing any of the color in that foil flake, what I'm going to do is I'm first going to spray seal it, and then I will do one coat of Quick Coat. And once that's done, I have one more detail I want to add on here before we're going to move on to final seal before epoxy. So this is where we are right now, and I will be back after I have sealed this guy up to show you guys the next step. I'm now ready to add the last detail I'm going to be putting on this before we add the epoxy. So in this step, again, we're going to be using Tack-It, so it's going to be very important to make sure that your sealer once again has dried, that it's completely hardened. You don't want to have this have any type of tack, or we're going to run into problems during this stage as well. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using Tack-It once again, but this time rather than applying it with the eyebrow brush, we're going to be applying it using a small foam stipple brush, just like this one here. So this is the smallest one that I could get, and I've already mixed in my Tack-It. I also have a piece of parchment paper here for a step I'm going to show you guys, which is optional as well. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. I have some of these rubber stamps here like this. This is one way that you can add some more texture onto this. Another way that you can add some detailing is by using things like stencils. So I have here just a couple vintage floral style. This is the Damask. This is like a floral swirl kind of stencils that I'm going to be putting onto my tumbler here. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of look around my tumbler, and I'm going to pick a couple spots where I maybe want to have some of the stencil laid on it. So I'm going to think that maybe this might be a nice place to have a stencil. So I'm just going to take my stencil and wrap it around like that. Then I'm going to take my foam brush, and you don't want a lot on here because you don't want it to start running. So it doesn't take a lot. So I'm just going to use my parchment paper to kind of get rid of some of that excess. And I'm just going to start stippling it on, but only on the pieces where I want it to. And again, this is a distressed look, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Like if you miss a section in your stippling, that's not going to be a problem. It's just going to sort of add to some of that distressed look on it. So I'm not going to do the whole stencil. I'm just kind of picking and choosing what parts I want it. And I'm just going to clean my stencil when I'm done using some soap and water. Okay. So that's that stencil there, so I can see where the glue is. I'm just going to put that one to the side. And I'm thinking maybe I want to add a little swirl maybe right here, something like that. Yeah, something like that. So I'm just going to follow the same technique. And then what I'm going to do for this one here, rather than putting the Tack-It directly on the stamp, because that's going to clog it up, I'm just going to add a little bit onto my parchment paper. And then I'll take my stamp, and you want to be careful. The smaller stamps I find work a little bit better because you can control them a little better, but you want to be careful with how you're doing it, that you're not going to smudge this all around, or else you're going to sort of lose the look of it. So I'm just going to take it and on the bottom just press it, being very careful not to shift once it's on. I'm going to do that again, maybe right here. And if it's not a perfect transfer, again, that's fine, because this is a bit of a distressed look on the tumbler. And I think I might do one more just right here, and I'm not going to add any more. I'm just going to use what is already on here, just like that. So I'm going to let this fully dry, and once it has dried, I will come back and show you what we're going to do with this. Once again, you can tell it's dry because it's completely clear, so now I know that I can add my my next step, which is going to be the Eco Glitters. So this is also from Cat Glitter Factory. This is called Twyla Cafe Tropical. It is a green with a gold shift in it. It is absolutely gorgeous. And I found that over a dark base, it more comes out gold with just sort of hints of the green, and it's really, really lovely. So just so you know as well, Amy from Cat Glitter Factory is now also offering a coupon code for people who are fans of this channel. It is Lovely Lulu 10, so it will get you 10% off of your order. There are some restrictions to that coupon, but let's get into application. So again, I'm going to be using my soft eyeshadow brush, and one of the ways that you can do this is you can just sort of take your brush over, and then once you find where the sticky areas are, you kind of know where you're going to start your application for this. And I'm just going to start burnishing it right on top of those areas. So again, this stuff is really fine and wispy. You've seen me you've seen me work with it in the past. So you want to be really careful when you're opening up this bottle in terms of like coughing, sneezing, breathing, having any fans running around it. You want to make sure you're avoiding all of that. It's just, you can probably see it floating all over the air too. So yeah, so you just take it on your brush, burnish it on, and wherever the Tack-It is where it will show up. So that's right there. So that's the Damask design. And then let's just sort of, there's another section here. Okay, so that's it for the background. If you want to distress this just a little bit so it's not quite so solid, what I've done is I've taken, you know what, maybe I will distress it just a little bit. So okay, so that's what it looks like for now. And I think this section right here, I'm just going to distress a little bit with some water and some paper towel. All right, so I've got my paper towel. So now what I'm going to do is just where I maybe want it to be distressed a little bit, or maybe not quite so bright, I'm just going to go in and rub a little bit away. So now it's still there, it's still present, but it's a lot more subtle. And I might do that, let me see, where am I going to decal this? This will be the back. So I'm going to do that here too. So I'm not totally washing it away, but I've just kind of lightened it up a little bit. So it's just going to be a little bit more subtle in the background. And this one I'm going to keep pretty solid. This section I'll keep solid. And then this section here I'll keep solid as well. So that's another thing you can do. You can just sort of play around with, you know, like your mediums and the effects that they have and how they look and everything. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to seal this one more time. I will use the a spray sealer and then a coat of quick coat again, the CC DIY. And then I'm going to put on one coat of epoxy, and I will wait a few hours, and once I'm at the recoat window, I'm going to do a little bit of an additive in the glitter, so I will come back and show you guys when I am at that stage. I've added part A and part B, but I haven't yet mixed my epoxies into my measuring cup, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add just a tad bit of this Eco Glitter from Cat Glitter Factory. This is the color A Little Bit Alexis, and it is the medium chunky. It comes in a small, a medium, and a large. And again, this stuff is very, very wispy, so you want to be really careful with it. So it's kind of overexposed here in the camera. You can't really see it, but I just have a tiny, tiny amount on my scoop. It does not take a lot at all. And I'm just going to add a small amount into my epoxy before I mix it. And this is just going to add a little bit of shimmer onto my background. So I'm now going to mix my epoxy for 3 minutes, and then I'm going to apply this onto the coat of epoxy that I already have spinning. I applied that coat about 3 hours ago, or 4 hours ago, sorry. And now I'm ready to put the next coat on. So I'm going to do that, but to save time, I'm not going to show you. You guys have seen epoxy being applied to a cup before. So I will come back when it is ready for its next step, which will be the decal phase. So the decal I'm using today is Go Forth and Consume a Satchel of Richards. This is a layered decal, so it has a black offset on it, and I used for my vinyls, I have a champagne gold textured vinyl from Samalam's West Coast Vinyl. She's brought in some really gorgeous vinyls, and I highly recommend them. They weed really nicely. They are absolutely beautiful under epoxy and on a tumbler. And Sam has also been kind enough to offer a discount code for fans of this channel. So if you are a fan and it's your first order and you use LLLD first order 15, you will get 15% off. And after that, if you use LLLD 10, you will get 10% off of your order. So highly recommend her products. So go check her out if you can. I will link her shop in the comments, as well as I will have sort of on the screen what those coupon codes are, and it will also be in the description section of this video too. So we have the black offset, we have in this case here the textured vinyl. I've already layered that first vinyl here. I did lose a couple little tiny pieces when I was weeding it, so I just recut them and I'm going to add them after the fact. And because I reverse weed, I couldn't do both of them on top, and I had to reverse weed just because these are some pretty fine fonts and they just don't always like it when I weed them. Normally they kind of shift, and with the offset I wanted to make sure, like the way it's layered, that it didn't move at all. So I reverse weeded these. So for my other color I just used the Oracal 651 silver metallic vinyl. So that will go on using the parchment paper method that I have shown you in the past. So here is my main decal, and I've sort of looked at my cup already. I'm just using a little cup cradle to kind of keep my cup from rolling around on me. This is just made with a couple cut up pool noodles and some elastic bands, and I kind of want to put my decal right here. I just sort of look at, kind of eyeball what I like for height and where I want it to go. And for me, I like to measure to make sure that I have my decal perfectly straight on here, especially with these ones, which are kind of a pain to cut and weed. So I just take the same spot on each side and I measure it to make sure that it matches up. And that actually is on there right. So I cut my parchment paper in half. I used the hinge method. So I'm just going to pull back my backing paper. I start from the center and I'm just going to push it down as I go. This helps to reduce any bubbles underneath your vinyl. And I'm going to repeat the process on the other side as well. I'm just going to burnish it on my cup to make sure that it is really on there. I don't want to have any lifting when I'm peeling back my transfer tape. And a lot of people do ask which transfer tape I use. I use one that is by Oracal. I will link it in the description. I get it from, you know what, I can't even remember the name. It's another BC company, but I actually just use the Oracal brand transfer tape. So I will put that in the description as well. Okay, so now I'm just going to lift up corner here, pull that back, and I'm just pulling it completely flat, watching as I'm going to make sure that I'm not accidentally lifting up any part of the design. So now with the transfer tape off, you can see, oh there we go, you can see some of that texture on that vinyl, and it's really pretty. So I may as well put my missing pieces on now. Now for this decal, as I mentioned, I'm going to be using the parchment paper technique. I've done it before in other videos, so essentially, didn't have my paper ready. So essentially what you need to do is you just need to take a piece of paper, and I'm going to cut it about to size. So I may as well just pop that on now. And take my scissors. And I still do the hinge method, so I'm going to cut that in half as well. And the parchment paper, it doesn't stick to, but it's also translucent, so it allows you to sort of see your designs underneath and between. If I can get it to lay flat. And it just allows you to line it up pretty accurately. So that there is pretty good. So whenever I work with specialty vinyls, I always like to seal with a coat of Quick Coat first. So I will do that. I also do add my care instructions to the bottom of the tumbler, which does include my logo as well. I know, again, that that is something that people, you know, like debate, should you, shouldn't you? I feel that an artist should always sign their work. I think it's good for my customers to know where they purchase things from. And my stickers are on transparency. They're transparent background stickers, so they're not overly like obnoxious, and they're not a massive size either, so I'll just pop one on to show you. The design for these, if you are interested in this with the care instructions, is available on my Etsy shop, as is the design for the Go Forth and Consume a Satchel of Richards. These have a blank center, so you can add your logo or initials if you want to. If not, and you just want to have the care instructions, you could leave it blank, or you could put something else there that maybe would match the theme of your tumbler. So that is that. So I will get some epoxy on this, and then this tumbler will be done as soon as it has had the sealer, the clear coat sealer, and the epoxy. I will epoxy until smooth, and then it will be ready for my page. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please support me by giving it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, please click my logo to subscribe and tickle that little notification bell so you'll be notified of future videos I post. You can also check out more of my videos by clicking on one of the thumbnails on the right or by scrolling through my playlists. Thanks again for watching, and I'll be back for more tumbler tips and tutorials.